Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'd like to declare my interest as a board member of a charity, the WP Community Fund. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I support the proposed amendments relating to the disqualifications and removal of persons involved in charities. I have some concerns regarding the changes to the definition and coverage of key officer and fundraising appeal, which are important. First, on the definition of key officer. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, regarding the proposed expansion in the definition of key officer, I'd like to ask the Minister whether all members of the governing board of a charity will be considered as key officers. I'm concerned that the onerous liability imposed with the amendments will discourage people from wanting to serve in charities, especially smaller charities where management resources may be limited, and that in turn puts pressure on people wanting to serve. How will the Ministry allay such fears and encourage more volunteers to step up and serve in charities, both big or small? I next move on to fundraising appeal. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I go on to the change in the definition and limits of fundraising appeal in Section 39. Under the amendment bill, the existing definition of fundraising appeal to members of the public will be deleted and replaced by a new set of definition. It seems to me that the existing scope of fundraising appeal to members of the public will now be expanded quite considerably beyond the members of the public. In the explanation note to the bill, the Ministry cited a new example of an appeal by an unincorporated association to its members. The existing law applies to an appeal to members of the public and does not cover private appeal or donations. However, the explanation note in the bill stops there without any further elaboration. It does not elaborate adequately on its expanded coverage. I have some concerns with this change of definition and coverage of fundraising appeal, especially the extent of the scope of its coverage. It appears that the coverage may now extend to unsolicited donations, private donations, or fundraising in schools, associations, and religious organizations. First, unsolicited donations. The Ministry comments to public feedback during the public consultation process. The Ministry also stated that this can now include unsolicited donations and appeals to grant-making philanthropic organizations. The explanation note to the bill does not, however, confirm this or say anything about it. Unsolicited donations, as its name suggests, are donations made purely voluntarily and without any initiative or action on the part of the charity. It is therefore extremely odd to include such donations as part of fundraising appeals. I'd like to ask the Minister, why is there a need now to include such a new category into the definition, such that its coverage actually exceeds its literal meaning? Is there any particular recent incidents which prompted the Ministry to think that the expanded coverage is absolutely necessary? If so, would the Minister share with the House some details of the incident and how it led the Ministry to propose these changes? Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would also like to know from the Minister what are the changes the Ministry will be making to the fundraising regulations which will apply specifically to unsolicited donations. Next, grant-making philanthropic organizations. As regards grant-making philanthropic organizations, may I clarify with the Minister, how does the amendment affect them? And are we talking about such organizations making appeals for donations to fund the grants or assistance they render to members of the public? Next, private fundraising within schools, associations, and religious organizations. The Ministry stated in their comments to public consultation feedback that they have intended for fundraising to include private fundraising activities within schools, associations, and religious organizations. So it seems that besides grant-making philanthropic organizations, the coverage will be extended to other non-charity fundraisers. The Ministry said that it's important for the Commissioner to be able to stop improper fundraising. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I do not doubt that such new regulations may be able to enable the Commissioner to be in a better position to stop improper fundraising. However, I'm concerned that this may also discourage many sincere and well-meaning Singaporeans in their different organizations from raising funds for very good reasons, not to mention the resulting bureaucratic hoops that will be imposed on non-charity fundraisers. Will the Minister also clarify whether this new definition of fundraising appeal and the fundraising appeal regulations to be amended will apply to all types of fundraising by schools, associations, and religious organizations, or will they cover only a certain limited modes of fundraising? For example, will it apply to religious organizations raising funds by auctions? For example, as we often see during temple or 7-month dinners. Next, small fundraising efforts. The ministry stated in their comments to public feedback during consultation that the ministry will be reviewing fundraising regulations to make clear which requirements will not apply to small fundraising efforts. I'm not sure I heard the minister correctly in her speech just now, and may I ask the minister to elaborate a little bit more on the limits of small fundraising efforts and how small fundraising efforts apply to fundraising in schools, associations, and religious organizations, whether they be mosques, churches, or temple organizations. Crowdfunding regime. Given the new expanded definition of fundraising appeal, I would also like to ask the minister to confirm whether the new regulation, the new regime will also apply to online crowdfunding. There are amazing Singaporeans who raise funds and gather volunteers online to carry out acts of charity and kindness, such as providing meal vouchers, food, daily necessities, or supermarket vouchers to elderly folks or households who may be struggling financially. I've read from press report that the Code of Practice for crowdfunding platforms will be launched this month by the Commissioner of Charities. But it seems that it will not be mandatory. I do hope that, however well-meaning this code may be, the code or any intended regulation will not stifle or discourage Singaporeans from continuing their acts of charity through crowdfunding. My conclusions on the fundraising appeal point. It appears to me that significant amendments will need to be made to the current subsidiary legislations on fundraising regulations to cover the expanded scope of fundraising appeal. I think we should know at this point, not later, the sufficient details about what are the impending regulatory changes. I would have preferred that this bill would have shed more light on these details, the explanatory note in the bill. The House should in fact assess this bill with the changes the ministry intend to make in the subsidiary legislations to know what is the ultimate package that the public can expect. And overall, without the benefit of looking at the fine print changes in the fundraising regulations, I am concerned whether the change to the definition and coverage of fundraising appeal may make it too onerous for charities, whether especially smaller charities with limited resources or volunteers in these charities, as well as non-charity fundraisers. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would also like to take the opportunity to ask the Minister for her view on the continuing relevance of the rationale of the 80-20 ratio for persons wishing to conduct fundraising appeals for foreign charitable purposes, where 80% of the funds raised must go towards charitable purposes in Singapore. How does the government see that such a ratio will continue to benefit charities or any organization raising funds for a foreign charitable cause? How does the government weigh that against the benefit of our locally based charity helping to raise funds for a worthy foreign charitable cause? I'm aware that there are exceptions to this rule, but for those who are not excluded from the rule's application, is it time to review this requirement or adjust the current ratio? Mr. Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, I agree that it is good to encourage good governance among our charities in our fundraising efforts, for example. At the same time, I believe we should also be mindful that requirements are not too impractical or onerous, that they create additional unnecessary burdens on our charities, their staff and volunteers, as well as non-charities and well-meaning Singaporeans. Thank you.